Hello! Welcome to the third episode of the George Macy Imagery video series. It's January, it's my birthday month. I like to celebrate things that really mean a lot to me. It took me a bit. It took me a bit to go, what do I want to cover for January? Because I love all of my books. All of them are special. But I felt like I really wanted to point out a particular author, one that doesn't get his due in modern literature, but the George Macy Company went all in on in a surprising fashion, and that's Anatole France. And while I don't have everything, I have a lot, and I have two big goals for 2021 in terms of purchasing books. One is to finish the first series, which I have 6 more to do. The second is to get all of the rest of the Anatole France books. The good news for me is I don't have a lot on that front. I basically have the Heritage Penguin Island exclusive and the LEC edition of Crane Caville, and I probably am butchering that horribly. I am not a native French speaker. I am not a learned French speaker. I am not a French speaker whatsoever. So I will do my best. But Anatole France, I discovered through the Heritage edition of Revolt of the Angels and the Heritage edition of Penguin Island. And I don't have those particular copies anymore because I upgraded them both to LECs. But since then, I've added the Heritage Non-Such French Romance, The Gods Are Athirst, and then the earliest 2 LECs, which is the Crime of Sylvestre Bonnard and At the Sign of the Queen Pedauque. Again, I apologize for my horrible pronunciation. But I really love the works of Anatole France, just based on Revolt of the Angels and Penguin Island. Both of them turned out to be sensational novels with incredible endings, really fleshed out characters, messages I can get behind. It's really a shame that he's not better acknowledged 100 years on since his passing. I don't quite remember when he passed away, but it was around the 1920s when he got the Nobel Prize for Literature. George Macy apparently was a big fan because all of these were printed during his lifetime. In fact, once he had passed away, that's kind of when the Anatole France train stopped. There was no more after that. So I'm going to go in order in terms of LEC, and then we'll cover the Heritage exclusive over there. And then in time, I'll cover the other 2 books that I'm going to be picking up later this year. And while I'm at it, I also thought it might be kind of fun to point out the Revolt of the Angels and Penguin Island that I have shown off on the blog that are not LECs. And I will show those off at the very end. Alright, so the very first one is At the Sign of the Queen Pedauque. I feel I said that differently this go around than I did the first time. Again, I apologize. This was the 49th Limited Editions Club issuing, and it came out in 1933. This was in the red slipcase that we saw earlier, so let me show that off real fast. I'm going to go ahead and bring it just a tad closer so you can see the detail in the book a bit better. This was a motif that was used a few times, despite being designed by different people. but they all shared one thing in common, which was Sylvain Sauvage. This was used, to my knowledge, 3 times. It was used for this book, it was used for the first Serenity Bergerac, and then it was used for the Crime of Sylvestre Bonnard. And Sylvain was involved with all 3 of those. So we'll just go ahead and flip to the colophon real quick so we can get the production details down. Unfortunately, the way this is printed, the very last page is shown. So I'm just going to read it real quick so that way we don't want to spoil the end of the book. So 1,500 copies of this book have been made from the watercolor illustrations by Sylvain Sauvage at the Lakeside Press in Chicago under the direction of William A. Kittredge. This copy is number 278 and is signed by Sauvage. So I will show the colophon page, but just try not to look at the other side. Alright. Just go ahead and get the title page up. Okay, so Sauvage is one of my favorite illustrators in the LEC and the Heritage Press. There is not a book he put out that I don't like, and I'm getting close to having all of the ones he was involved with. Just to provide a quick little overview, this was his first LEC, which is a memorable debut. This was followed up by the aforementioned Serenity de Bergerac in 1936, and then the Crime of Sylvestre Bonnard came out in 1937. After that, As You Like It in the LEC Shakespeare was his next appearance. That's one I am missing. Then we had The Physiology of Taste, which came out in 1949. That one, unfortunately, is not signed as he had passed away. There's also in the Evergreen Tales that, if I recall, the 3rd set has his take on the Sleeping Beauty in the Wood. And then the last one is The History of Zadig or Destiny, which came out in 1952 and is considered the memorial edition for Sauvage. Off the top of my head, he also did 3 Heritage exclusives, which was Romeo and Juliet, which was one of the first Heritage Press books. He also did the Heritage exclusive version of Penguin Island, and then he also did the Heritage exclusive version of Candine. Is it Candine or Candine? I'm not sure, but by Voltaire. So that is his bibliography, and none of those are unimpressive in any way, shape, or form. All of them are excellent. The only one I have not seen firsthand is Romeo and Juliet for the Heritage and As You Like It in the LEC Shakespeare. But yeah, as we can see, we've got the translation is provided by Mrs. Wilfred Jackson. Jackson is one of the most prominent translators that are used in Anatole France editions. Ernest Boyd provides an introduction here. And we'll go ahead and flip through a few pages so you can see what the rest of the book looks like. So this uses red throughout, so you can see up at the top and there. That's a nice red ink. And then the page numbers are also red. And then you'll also have introduction spotlighted, so we'll see if that continues past the introduction. Alright, so here's chapter 1. And as you can see, a wonderful watercolor. Absolutely gorgeous work. He is so good. He really is. And yeah, it looks like instead of introduction, it now says the title of the book. So let me flip through. Here's a example watercolor there, and this one is just lovely. We'll be covering this book either, I can't remember, I think this one's February's. So you'll actually get the full post on this in very short order. We'll also be covering Crime of Sylvestre Bonnard later in the year, per the devotee vote. Let me see if I can find. Oh, there's another one, and again, just masterful work. I really love Sylvain's style. You can also see that there's some notes throughout the text as needed, and we'll go ahead and just find one more illustration to show off. Yeah, just lovely work. How he painted the glass orb in the character's hands there is just incredible, absolutely incredible. So yeah, I got this from Pals last year. Very happy to have this in my collection. Alright, number 2 on today's docket is the Crime of Sylvestre Bonnard. As you can see, the style of the binding on this is very similar to the last one. It's not exact, but it's very similar. It kind of surprises me because each of the 3 books that did this thematic binding design for Sauvage's 3 early books, they were all different. And I also carried over to the back too. It's like this one has a nice reproduction of one of the illustrations. Let me take a quick look at the colophon. Alright, we have no spoilers this time, so I don't need to hide the colophon quite as much. Of this edition of the Crime of Sylvestre Bonnard, 1,500 copies have been made. The edition is designed by Edward A. Miller and printed at the Marchbanks Press in New York. The illustrations done in watercolor by Sylvain Sauvage are reproduced by the Duane-Wald Printing Corporation. This copy is number 278, and it is signed by the illustrator. If my memory is correct, these are the only 3 books that Sylvain Sauvage signed out of all the LECs I listed off. The Physiology of Taste was, I think, issued the year of his death, and then generally speaking, the Evergreen Tales are not always signed, and that's convoluted. You have to read my post on that one for a little bit more background. And then, as the Dig came out well after his passing. So let's go ahead and head to the front. This one was translated by a different person, Winifred Jackson. This one is by Lafcadio Hearn. Lafcadio Hearn, I think that's correct. You can tell that Sylvain Sauvage approached this book a little differently because the watercolors are not quite as vibrant. They don't pop the same way. So this feels a little bit more grounded, more like realistic in my opinion. They're still lovely. That is not taking anything away. It's actually praise for his expertise. It was introduced by A.S.W. Rosenbach and printed in 1937. So let's go ahead and flip through. So this one doesn't have the red everywhere, but you can see that they did include it like they did in the earlier book in the corners there, and then with the title once we actually get into the book proper. And so here's the first illustration, which is a replica. This is what the illustration on the back was taken from. Just amazing work. Like, I'm looking at this and I'm blown away at how detailed and stunning these illustrations are. Sauvage really just set a standard early that the France books were going to be something special, and luckily they continued to be that way all the way through. Most of these have full page illustrations, so we'll go ahead and find a few more in here. There's another one there. This one will be featured on the blog later this year. I can't remember the exact month off the top of my head. Oops. There's another one there. Just truly stunning work. I need to read these two. These are the two I haven't read, as well as The Gods Are Athirst. But I also got this at Powell's. The architect, in his normal job, submitted this attempt of Penguin Island, and the committee really liked it, and it was selected. It's a different take. So we've seen two from Sylvain Sauvage. Cameron is whimsical, but it's a different take. I like it, but not as much as the Heritage Penguin Island, or the Frank C. Pape illustrations, which I will show after I show off this book. So this unfortunately did get a little bit stained along the way to my ownership. But here's the title page. It was printed in 1947. Malcolm Cameron did did drawings for these, and they're really nice. Like, they do capture the spirit of the book. This is one of the ones I have read. I love this book. I adore this book so much. There is a Heritage reprint of this, but the LEC is definitely the way to go. In my opinion, the illustration quality in here is higher. And it just looks generally nicer. Let's go ahead and do a quick look at the colophon. So this edition of Penguin Island has been planned by Joseph Blumenthal for the members of the LEC and printed by the Aldous printers, the illustrations having been drawn by Malcolm Cameron and printed in gravure. I always want to say gravure, but I'm pretty sure that's not how it's said, by the Photogravure and Color Company. They were used a lot, that company. And Blumenthal designed a lot of books, too, for that matter. So this is 1023 out of 1500, and Malcolm Cameron did sign this edition. Cameron did not do much else for the LEC, from what I recollect. If my memory is correct, he did one of the Evergreen Tales, and I think that's the end of his run. He illustrated Jack and the Beanstalk, which came out in 1952, so a little after this. And that was the end of his run. So let's go ahead and flip through, show off some of the illustrations. Now, Carl Van Doren did provide the introduction, and much like the Dodd Mead, was translated by A.W. Evans, which seems to be the popular translation for this particular work. Alright, so it starts with Book 1, The Beginnings. And again, Cameron is a really good illustrator. I do not want to take away from the high quality that he did. I do like these. The little line here that looks like part of... I think that's one of the motifs that they used on the slipcase. Some of these chapters are really short, explaining how Penguin Island came to be. This is a very satirical work, really poking fun at history, at Europe, at the hubris of humanity, religion, you name it, really. France was very, very good at his satire. So this is the navigation of Saint Mail, who is the one who gets this ball rolling. Without giving too much away, Saint Mail is blind, and lands on an island of penguins, literal penguins. That's why it's called Penguin Island. But in the process blesses the penguins because he cannot tell that they are not human. God sees this and realizes that these animals cannot be given such divine status as penguins, so they suddenly are now human. They become human and have the follies of not starting that way. And then a lot of particular things take place that mirror actual history. It's just a wonderful book, and it's written like a history of the people of Penguin Island. There's another example of the chapter divider illustrations. Orberosia and the Dragon. It's been a long time since I've read this, so I'm not 100% remembering her role in the book, but she's pretty important from what I remember in the early points. And then Talpo writes the Gesta Penguinorium. Again, Cameron's really good. You can see his architectural hand in some of these illustrations, like this one in particular. So this is a really nice book. Definitely recommend it. Let's do a quick comparison, though, with the Dodd Mead edition of Penguin Island, which is my favorite. I won't probably do this super often because I don't have too many copies of books that I have multiple editions of, but I do love Penguin Island very much, and this was actually what I had this well before I had the LEC of Penguin Island. I got Penguin Island this year from a fellow devotee, and at some point I will update the Heritage Penguin Island post with the LEC. This one here is on my blog. I got this at Carpe Diem Fine Books in Monterey several years ago. But Frank C. Pape, incredible illustrator. My goodness. I wish he did a Limited Editions Club book because he is so talented, and it really makes me wonder if the timing was just off. I don't remember when Pape passed away, but I just look at this and I'm just stunned, literally stunned. Here's the title page. This one was also translated by A.W. Evans. Like I said, seems to be the popular translation. And here you can see like the actual transformation from the penguin into the human that I mentioned. We'll just kind of flip through. It's not printed as well or as stylish as the LEC. You can tell the production quality is not quite as high. It's nice, don't get me wrong, and the illustrations are incredible, but it's definitely more mass market than the LEC is. But you can see that the design is still incredible. It's got lovely illustrations throughout, like these little ones here. It's got lovely decorated initials to launch each chapter. And then there's a lot of these little ending illustrations, and then you get these just beautiful full page illustrations that just are I've said incredible a lot, but that's what they are. They are some of the best book illustrations I've ever seen. Like, no question. Pape is a marvel. And I think he did a couple others for Dodd Mead, for Anatole France, because they printed a lot of his works around the 1910s. Here's another one. Just beautiful stuff. Let me see if there's any design info in the back of the book. I don't think there is, but it's been a while since I looked at it. Yeah, there's not. Which is unfortunate, because I would love to know who actually designed this particular book, because they did a really good job. It was made and printed in Great Britain by William Clowes and Sons Limited, London and Brussels. And this is the 1926 reprinted edition, based on the illustrated edition that came out in 1925. So, lovely book. Lovely book. Next up on the docket is probably the least exciting of the France books that the LEC published. That's not to knock it, because it's still lovely, but its creation is probably the least interesting of them all. So this is Revolt of the Angels. This is one of the more common heritage books I've seen. So if you want to get the heritage edition, there's really no reason not to, because the LEC is almost equivalent. This is one of those cases where if you buy the heritage, you're almost as good as if you bought the LEC. And the reason for that is that the LEC isn't signed. It came out unsigned, and the only reason that I have the LEC, because I had the heritage, is because of the condition. The heritage had a very common problem of very faded spines, and this particular LEC didn't have that problem, and I was ecstatic about it. It was also not that expensive. Anytime I can find an LEC for $20 or less, I tend to hop on it, especially in this condition. I got this at Beers Books in Sacramento in 2019, I want to say. And we'll go ahead and open it up. But as I was saying, this is one of the least exciting books because of the fact that the heritage is almost the exact same, just very slight production qualities, and because of the illustrator being commissioned after doing the artwork. And so let me explain. So the sandglass that I had for the original talks about Revolt of the Angels and why they have the art that it does. So let me find that. Okay. In Paris, and I'm talking as Macy here. So, in Paris, we came across a series of etchings done for the French publisher Calmain Levy, who was Anatole France's original publisher, etchings made by an artist whose name was then unknown to us. We thought them wonderfully apt, deft, funny. Calmain Levy was issuing an edition of The Revolt of the Angels in a quantity of 300 outrageously expensive copies. As quickly as we could, we made a deal to reproduce those etchings for the lucky people who are members of the Limited Editions Club, and then the Heritage Press also did it as well. His illustrations were made by Pierre Watrine. He is a Frenchman, and a young Frenchman at that, having been born in Normandy during the course of the First World War in August of 1918. He did fight in the Second World War, and continues to talk about more about his history. But basically, this artwork is not original to the Limited Editions Club. It was produced for a extremely limited edition for a French publisher that Macy came across, liked enough to go ahead and put them out, and this is the last LEC of Anatole France, and it's a good book. I don't want to rag on the book, because the book itself is great, especially if we look at it from a literary perspective. I like Penguin Island slightly more, but Revolt of the Angels is also an incredible novel. This one, I won't go too deep into plot details, but it goes about a young man who has a guardian angel, but then that angel gets caught up in a revolt against God. And it just kind of follows both of those characters as they go through this change, this upheaval, and then it ends in the most spectacular way possible, as Anatole France novels do. I have not come across another author who can end a book as well as Anatole France does. It's really remarkable. So let's go ahead and take a look at this book. So like I was saying, the translation was by Miss Wilfred Jackson. Desmond McCarthy provided a unique introduction to this edition, and Waltreen is the illustrator. This was, if I recall, let's jump to the colophon real fast. And if it's on the same as the last page, and I really do not want to ruin the book after giving it so much praise, so let me read it off camera. Of this edition of The Revolt of the Angels, 1,500 copies have been printed by Saul and Lillian Marks at the Plantin Press, Los Angeles. The illustrations by Pierre Waltreen having been reproduced by the Photogravure and Color Company. This is copy number 1431 and was issued unsigned. It's slightly off camera, but again, I really do not want to spoil the ending of this book if I can avoid it. So I apologize for being off center. So let's take a look at how this looks inside. I do like the way that the Marks designed the book. It looks very nice on the interior. I love these little winged flourishes that they came up with. The chapter headers are great, and it does have a nice little explanation of each chapter. And the font's good. This is a nice, readable, delightful font, and the pages are really shimmery. It's a good paper that they used. So the illustrations you can see here are kind of, I think the majority of them are these smaller, kind of tucked in pieces. There's a few bigger ones, if my memory is correct. It's been a little while since I've looked inside this book. Yeah, there's a few full-page illustrations. And Waltreen's illustrations are nice, but I think out of the ones we've seen so far, they're the weakest. And that's not a knock against Waltreen at all. It's just a preference thing. They're totally serviceable. They're totally nice. They're just not my favorite. We're going to see my favorite here in a couple minutes. And there's one more of the small ones. Let me see if I can find one more of the full page. Okay, and there's another of the full page ones. Again, totally nice artwork. Just a little flat, especially when we get to the next book. So if you want this, the heritage is really similar. Like I said, it's a slight difference in quality. You're going to get nicer materials. You're going to probably have a better time finding an adequate spine that's not sunned. But there's not much reason to just say, I want the LEC, unless you get it really cheap. Here is the Dodd Mead edition of Revolt of the Angels by the same illustrator as the Penguin Island, Frank C. Pape. I'm actually going to bring this a little closer and hope it focuses. There we go. This is incredible. Incredible is my word for Pape, because everything I've seen of theirs is that. It really is. So here is the end paper illustration again. Not perhaps as stunning as Penguin Island, because Penguin Island was just bananas, but this is still really cool. The war between heaven and hell. A really cool title page, or a pre-title page. And here is the actual title page. Just incredible stuff. And of note is that the Revolt of the Angels does use the Dodd-Mead translation. So this particular one was printed in 1924 in the illustrated edition. The original was in 1914, and this is a 1928 reprint. This is a little bit less browned than My Penguin Island. This was a gift, so I don't know exactly where it came from originally. But it's kind of the same deal. You've got these really nice headers. You've got the really nice chapter decorations. This, I think, is printed slightly better. The paper's nicer, I think. And here's another one of, like, almost every chapter ends with a little illustration. But let's find some of the really big ones, because they are, per everything I said about Penguin Island, beautiful and incredible. So there's an example there. Just stunning stuff. The detail in these, and I didn't point this out with Penguin Island, but these are printed on a thicker paper, a cardstock. Just really makes them pop even more. Here's another one here. Oh, just looking at this book again just makes me happy. I haven't looked through these in a little bit. Just a beautiful, beautiful book. And there's another one here. I do have some more examples on the blog. That's the comparisons against the Dodd-Mead editions, but we've got one more. We've got one more in this very lengthy video that I'm producing here. And that is The Gods Are Athirst, a Heritage exclusive edition that is part of the Heritage and Non-Such French Romances series, which I do have a blog post entirely on. This particular book is on the blog. In fact, Revolt is as well. I forgot to mention that. The LEC and the Heritage comparison is there. So, without re-digging up that entire blog post, which I just realized this is upside down, my apologies. So without digging up that entire blog post, history of the Heritage Non-Such French Romances, the short version is that Macy and Francis Meynell, who owned the Non-Such Press, decided to collaborate on reproducing classic French romances in a mutually shared series to help the Heritage Press develop more exclusives, and probably the same thing with Non-Such. So you will find these with Non-Such and Heritage. This particular one is the Heritage version, so they have different colors, but the design motif is the same. This is the sole Anatole France version. This is complete, so it does have the sand glass in it. And this also has a unique illustrator for the Heritage Press and the Limited Editions Club. So here's the title page, The Gods Are Athirst. Authorized translation from the French by Alfred Allinson, with an introduction by André Maurice, and illustrations by Jean Oberle. I will be honest that Oberle is not my favorite illustrator, but we'll get into that as we see some more examples. But this is a lovely design book. I believe Meynell served as the designer on this. Let me check in the sand glass so I can confirm. Yes, designed by Sir Francis Meynell, which makes sense. The text was printed by the Riverside Press of Cambridge, Massachusetts. Illustrations by the Photographer and Color Company. Colors have been skillfully applied by the Arrow Press. And it was bound... Actually, it doesn't say who the bookbinder was on this one. It's probably Russell Rutter, to be completely honest with you, because almost every Heritage Press book was done by them. Alright, so here's chapter 1. The font is really small. That, like, if we contrast it with Revolt of the Angels, which had a really big font, this is probably the most condensed font size that we've had. And that's okay. It's still readable. So let me find a couple illustrations. Here's one here. This is better than the title page. It's when we compare these with all the other ones that I have shown today, in my opinion, they are the least interesting, the flattest. Because Anatole France, to me, it screams out either fantasy or just realistic. And I feel like this artwork is it's a weird in-between that just doesn't work for me. I feel that this artwork is going for something that, for me, just doesn't work. It's perfectly serviceable. It's perfectly fine. It's just not my favorite. And that's going to be the case sometimes with these books. And I'll get into that just a slight bit deeper in just a second. Like, this one's pretty nice. But there was about 8 to 10 of these. I don't remember the exact number off the top of my head now. But this is the only way you can get The Gods Are Athirst through the Heritage Press. So there's two, like I said at the very beginning of this video long ago, that I currently do not have, which is the Heritage version of Penguin Island, which has Sylvain Sauvage's artwork in it, and probably one of their cooler bindings, to be completely honest with you. It's got, similar to the Aeneid, which I showed off 2 months ago, it's got a nice embossed binding with some penguins on it that looks really, really cool. Queen Pedauque, which was illustrated by Bernard Lamont, who, I will be completely transparent, is probably my least favorite illustrator on the LEC. So that has not been much of a priority. And in contrast to the rest of these books, which I think at the very least have really nice binding designs and illustrators that I like, the binding on Queen Pedauque is also kind of my least favorite as well. It's also not that different from the Heritage. So that's why I don't have it yet. But I want to get all of Anatole France's works because I do love them a lot. And I want to actually have as many of them in nice editions as I can. Because he's one of my favorite authors. And it's because of the Heritage Press editions of Revolt of the Angels and Penguin Island that I was able to discover that I really enjoyed his work. So that's why I'm popping him today. And highly, highly, highly recommend checking him out through the LEC or the Heritage Press. These two are exclusive to the LEC. These two have Heritage versions, as well as the original Penguin Island in the Heritage, and then Queen Pedauque also is a Heritage, and then this is a Heritage exclusive. And that's everything about Anatole France that I can tell you about the George Macy Company. This was fun. This was a really fun video to make. I love talking about Anatole France, and this just seemed like the best opportunity to just do a whole bunch of it. So I hope that you enjoyed it as well. Next month, I think I want to do something that really resonates with my other goal for 2021, acquisitions. I want to talk about 6 of the first LECs. We're going to talk about Leaves of Grass. We're going to talk about Snowbound. We're going to talk about 2 medieval tales, the Decameron Tartarin of Tarascon, and the Fables of Jean de La Fontaine. My goal this year is to acquire the other 6, which is the Travels of Lemire Gulliver, Travels of Baron Munchausen, Narrative of Arthur Gordon Pym, Rip Van Winkle, Undine, and Robinson Crusoe. Some of those are expensive. But those are my 2 acquisition goals. I got so many books in 2020 that I think if I just dial it down to 8 to 10, I'll be really happy with that. Anyway, so we'll have that to talk about next time. So thank you for listening in. Thank you for watching. Thank you for being a part of this blog. I hope you enjoyed. I'll talk to you next month. And the post on Cicero will be up in the next week or 2. Till then, take care.